your man, Louie Tee. Welcome to the 2019 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series where your man Louie Tee aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2019 NFL Draft using our baseball grading scale. Single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts here in the Draft Wrap-Up Series. We cannot tell how these players are going to pan out, and I don't want to discount any of these young men before they get their chance in the National Football League. And so, we're going to score for each and every player selected in said team's draft. We'll apply bonuses when necessary, get an aggregate score, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right, you the viewer out there are in total control, as this is the You Pick format. Simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos stating two things, the phrase next, and the team you'd like to see next. Some examples would be Texans next, Houston next, Hugh next, Texans. You get where I'm going with this. As a matter of fact, the next team up in the series is none other than the Houston Texans. And wow, what a difference a month makes. Hell, what a difference a week makes. The Texans are now GM-less. And similar to the Jet situation, a little dysfunctional, but they had their reasons as to why they felt like it was a necessity to move on from GM Brian Gaine. Now, we don't know what's true, what isn't true with that situation. If anything reported is true, then that's some damning accusations against him, and he probably needed to be ousted. If it's not true, that's a situation that it's a damn shame. Nonetheless, the Texans, he probably should have been fired off the strength of this draft alone. I kid, but this is not one of my favorite drafts in 2019, and I thought they were one of the teams that really had some egregious reaches throughout the 2019 NFL Draft. There were other teams that had some reaches, like the Lions in the second round, selecting Jelani Tavai out of Hawaii at the linebacker position. In the second round, you can't afford to have doubles. Let's just be frank. You can't have doubles in the second round. Your first two rounds should really contain only home runs and triples. And if you're dipping into that double pool, that means most likely your draft isn't going to be what I think it should be. Now, again, we don't know what these draft picks are going to turn out to be. And we don't know how good or how bad these drafts are for 3 or 4 years down the road. So while I'm going to tell you that I don't love this draft, if they hit on these offensive linemen that they took at the top of the draft, and if they hit on one or two of these positional players, all of a sudden this draft looks totally different, and we're singing a different tune, and how wrong we were back in 2019 when we were ridiculing the Texans for taking an offensive tackle that people thought should go no earlier than the second, and we're killing the Texans for taking other guys that shouldn't have been taken in the second round. We'll see. But I can tell you this much. I thought the Texans needed to attack certain positions aggressively, and for the most part, they did that in this draft. Now, did they take players that I thought they should have taken? That's up for debate. That's another story and another debate for another day. That being said, they did address some big needs in this draft that they had on their roster. They had some holes to fill, and I thought they filled some of those in this draft. Now, did they fill them with good football players? That is to be seen. Again, we'll talk about all those things and then some in this draft breakdown. Let's get to the Houston Texans and their 2019 NFL Draft, and we start in the first round. 23rd overall selection, offensive lineman out of Alabama State, Titus Howard is the pick to get this Texans draft underway. So I talked to many a Texans fan that thought that this was a massive reach in the first round. I talked to many other fans of other teams, just fans of the National Football League like myself, who thought this was a massive reach. And I'm here to agree with all of you that thought that this was a reach. I won't go as far as to say massive reach, okay? Massive would insinuate that he shouldn't have been taken for the third until the third or the fourth round. That's probably not the case. He's a second-round tackle in many drafts. In this draft where the tackle position wasn't as highly sought after and coveted and guys weren't as elite, that's maybe why he got pushed up in this draft. But look, that's nor here nor there. I thought there were other tackles on the board at the time of this selection that would have better suited the Texans, that were better players at this current juncture. This guy may ultimately be better than all of those guys when it's all said and done. But if you're talking about coming in right now, which is what you're looking for, because this Texans team, believe it or not, is ready to win now. You're looking for guys that can step in and help now. I think Titus Howard is one of those guys that needs to develop. Now, he may have to develop on the fly, and he may get better as time passes and progresses, but at the end of the day, you need guys that can step in and be a rock for you now. I'm not sure if Titus Howard is ready to do that or not. We'll find out all in due time. But anyway, you took care of one of your biggest needs in this draft at the offensive line position, at tackle specifically. So let's get to that, your needs going into this draft. Obviously, offensive line, specifically tackle, was an issue for this football team last year. Your quarterback, Deshaun Watson, sacked 62 times last year. That's the most sacks given up by an NFL football team since John Kitna was sacked 63 times back in 2004. So that just gives you a little bit of perspective as to how bad it was for Deshaun Watson last year. Not all of it the fault of the offensive line. Watson is a guy that will hold on to the ball, will extend plays, and because of that, will take some sacks. But this offensive line was not good enough. Simply put, you needed to address that, and you did via the draft. Obviously, cornerback was decimated this offseason. To me, Jonathan Joseph, at some point, he's going to finally conk out on you. I don't know when that's going to happen. I've been saying it was going to happen 2 years ago. I said it was going to happen last year. It still hasn't. So I'm going to continue to be on that, man, Jonathan Joseph doesn't have that much left train until it finally reaches its stop. But you moved on from Kareem Jackson, who left in free agency. He's now a Denver Bronco. Well, you essentially swap corners. You take Bradley Roby on a one-year deal. They take Kareem Jackson. He's now in Denver. So you lose a veteran there. You gain a guy that you're not quite sure of. That's why you only gave him a one-year deal, because you want him to prove it to you. So, again, if he's not good, then he's not going to be back next year, and you're going to need even more corner help. So corner, definitely a big need for this football team. And so that's something they needed to address in this particular draft. Also, I thought safety was something you could take a look at. I know it's not sexy to spend another top round pick on a safety. Last year, your first pick in the draft was a third rounder spent on Justin Reed. And so you're probably not interested in spending another top, first 3 rounds of the draft pick on a safety again. But I would have not hesitated. Obviously, Tyrann Mathieu moved on in free agency. He's now a Kansas City Chief. You did get Tashawn Gibson, who was let go by the Jacksonville Jaguars, and so he stays in the AFC South Division now, a Houston Texan. That does help, and that does give you a starter. And so now you have 2 starters you should feel comfortable with, but I don't love the depth behind those guys. And so I thought safety was another position that you could have taken a look at and potentially drafted, and there were some good safeties to be had in this draft. Right around the 2nd, 3rd round, where you had some selections to spend, thought you could have gotten yourself an upgrade at the safety position, potentially. Running back, to me, I don't think people really realize how valuable Alfred Blue was to this team and in this offense, specifically at the running back position, because injuries seem to take place with this Texans team at the running back position. And Alfred Blue seemed to be the one guy that was always left standing, always a guy that could give you some touches and some carries and eat some carries up for this team. He caught it out of the backfield. He was very versatile. I thought really underrated for this Texans offense. He's now since moved on to Jacksonville. And so you need more help in that running back. Deontay Foreman, I don't think, has been what you thought he was going to be when you drafted him out of Texas. Again, Lamar Miller has been really good for you. But again, I think you could use more depth. Now, you did get a guy undrafted out of Michigan, and Karan Higdon, that may come in and ultimately make this team and may make the running back position, in terms of needing to draft one, obsolete. But at the time of this draft, I thought you could take a running back and you would feel good about getting a running back. And this was a draft class that didn't have elite backs, but did have some depth at the running back position. Thought you could have tapped into that. Tight end, you drafted some tight ends last year, a couple as a matter of fact. And so I wasn't sure if you were going to invest in a tight end again, but I thought that those guys last year were solid, but I thought you could also use another boost at tight end, and you actually did that this year. I didn't think you would, but I thought it was a need nonetheless, and I actually liked the guy that you got in this draft. I thought this was a very deep tight end group. You know how I feel about the tight ends in this draft, and you went and grabbed you one, and I thought that was a very smart situation on your part. And wide receiver, just always feel like the Texans never have enough at wide receiver. And I'd like to see them get a wide receiver with some size. DeAndre Hopkins is probably the biggest guy you got on your roster, and he's not huge. He's a 6'1", 6'2" guy. I'd like to see you add size. You got so many diminutive wide receivers. Seems like every receiver that you get on your roster is 6 feet or smaller. And I would love to see you add some size. And then also, you can never count on your receivers to stay healthy. Last year, you got a little bit of boost from the receiver out of Texas Tech, and then he gets injured in QT. I always expect Will Fuller to get hurt at some point in the season, and so you can't really rely on him for 16. Hell, I don't even think you can count on him for 12 games a season. And so I just felt like you needed to add more at the receiver position, and you didn't do that via the draft. But again, free agency after the draft, undrafted rookie, you got in Johnny Dixon out of Ohio State, another diminutive wide receiver, but he does add speed and the ability to take the top off the defense. And I think he's actually a solid weapon to add to the mix to see if he can make this football team. So I would have liked to have seen you attack the receiver position and preferably get a guy with some size to add to the mix. But you didn't do that, and you added another guy that can absolutely fly in Johnny Dixon. So we'll see what happens there. But let's get to Tytus Howard and what he brings to the table in the first round, 23rd overall selection. 6'5", 322 pounds, 34-inch arms, 5'0", 540, 34 career starts, 23 of them at right tackle, 11 at left tackle. The first thing that jumped off the screen at me when watching the tape with Tytus Howard was, why the hell are you at right tackle if you're good enough to be drafted in the NFL? You don't see guys at smaller schools like Alabama State being drafted in the first round of the NFL draft along the offensive line, specifically at tackle, and not playing left tackle. Generally, if you come from a small school, you're playing left tackle because that's the most important position. And then I saw them take one offensive snap and realize, oh, their quarterback is left-handed. Your blind side is now your right side, and that's where you put your best offensive lineman. Okay, I get it. My bad. So I had to back off because at first, initially, I was like, what is he doing at right tackle? If he's so good, he should be at left tackle. Then I found out why. Okay, so with that out of the way, an ex-high school quarterback and college tight end turned offensive lineman with good movement skills for the position. Core-wise, he'll have to get stronger and adjust to NFL caliber defenders with more consistency and with his hands. His punch, his placement, etc. all needs to be better. And the speed in which he uses his hands to punch and to dislodge defenders and do those things, he's going to have to speed up that entire process. He didn't face guys at an NFL level at Alabama State. And I actually was pleased with what I saw from him at the Senior Bowl. And so I think there's some things to build upon with this guy. You watched him against Auburn, and he was lights out in that football game. And so if he's standing up to and again, Auburn doesn't have any elite rushers, but still, for him to stand up to the Auburn defenders the way that he did, for him to stand up against the competition that he saw in the Senior Bowl the way that he did, it lets you know that he's not going to be that shell shock when jumping to the next level. However, against Auburn, he was bull rushed several times, not to the point where he gave up a sack, but to the point where the quarterback felt uncomfortable and flushed the pocket. So that's why I talk about his core and him needing to get a little bit stronger. That being said, but his talent, athleticism, size, and length make this raw prospect potentially a guy that can turn into a stud at the next level. And so this is a guy that I look at. Initially, I was sour on the pick. I'm not going to tell you that I love it because, again, it's not necessarily the player that I'm upset about. I just thought there were other guys on the board at the time that could give you instant gratification. They could give you instant production. And I'm not sure if Tytus Howard is ready to do that. He may ultimately jump right in week one, day one. You feel good about him, and he dominates. All right. And if that's the case, then you'll prove everyone, including myself, wrong. But right now, I'm not sure if with a team like the Texans that's ready to win right now, I'm not sure if Tytus Howard is the guy you want to select in the first round. Now, if you would have taken him when you took Max Scharping, then maybe I would feel a lot better about that selection. But maybe he wouldn't have been there. And maybe that's what you thought. And so that's why you pulled the trigger at 23, whatever the case may be. For me, I look at him. My comp is Teron Armstead, the ex-Arkansas Pine Bluff tackle that was stupid athletic at the combine, blew us all away. Obviously, you're not getting that kind of athleticism here, but you're getting a guy that has some athletic traits here in Titus Howard, but I liken him to Teron Armstead, small school guy, athletically gifted, similar size, could move around. You're getting him, and you're hoping that he can step in and be the left tackle of the future. I don't think Max Scharping is that guy, and so I think Max Scharping is more of a right tackle in this league than a left. And because of that, I think you're hoping that Titus Howard can man up the left side. We'll see what happens, but in any event, first round, 23rd overall selection, offensive lineman out of Alabama State. Titus Howard, for me, is... So we move on to the second round. Texas had 2 second rounders. I didn't love either one of them. 54th overall selection, defensive back out of Kentucky. Lonnie Johnson is the pick. So I just felt like you could have done better here. And this was such a big need for you coming into this draft that I just felt like you could have done much, much better. And if you wanted a big corner, I would have preferred you have taken Justin Lane out of Michigan State. Like, to me, that was my favorite big corner in this draft. If you were looking for a bigger, longer guy that could play out wide, that could run with these wide receivers and play the football, Justin Lane was my guy. And he was available here for you in the second round at the 54th selection. You chose Lonnie Johnson. He fits what you want to do, obviously. Let's take a look at what he brings to the table. Let's first take cornerback off the board as you address that need here with Lonnie Johnson. 6'2", 213. So again, that's the kind of size that I was talking about in terms of length, and 33-inch arms. Got that kind of safety build playing the cornerback position. 4'5'2", plenty of speed with a guy with that kind of length. And 38-inch vert, so that means he has some athleticism, can get up and go get the football. Well-built cornerback at 6'2", 213 that can be impactful when he is able to get his hands on the wide receiver to help him stay in phase, but is often beat by speed, lacks real ball production, and isn't in a position to challenge throws often enough, and is inconsistent in terms of effort as a tackler. There's just too many things that I don't love in the game of Lonnie Johnson, and that's part of the reason why I wasn't a fan of this selection here in the second round. You want to take Lonnie Johnson in the third round, you want to take Lonnie Johnson in the fourth round, be my guest. Again, probably wouldn't have been there with your selection in the third round, and no one wants to trade up to get a guy if they don't have to. And so I understand taking a guy, and I've always said, and I'll always continue to preach, get your guy when you feel the need to get your guy. And if this is the time you felt like you needed to get Lonnie Johnson, by all means, knock yourself out. That doesn't mean I have to love the selection, which I don't love this selection. I already told you I would have went in a number of different directions. The cornerback position at this moment in the draft had barely been touched. Remember, Greedy Williams had just come off the board a mere 5-6 picks earlier to the Cleveland Browns. So the cornerback position had been really unmolested. There was a slight run on corners at the top of the second round. Murphy went, Rock Ya-Sin went, a couple of those guys, but there were still corners to be had. Again, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but there were other guys that I thought were better than Lonnie Johnson available. Again, we'll see if he fits your DNA profile and fits what you want to do defensively and schematically. And if he does, then again, egg will be on my face, and I'll be the first to tell you that I was wrong. But right now, I don't love Lonnie Johnson and what he brings to the table. And so I think his comp for me is Kerry Williams. If you remember, the ex-Baltimore Raven, Philadelphia Eagle, Seattle Seahawk, a guy that was well-traveled, a long defender, but was beat down the field very often, was aggressive at the line of scrimmage, but didn't have the speed to carry that. And so he got beat down the field. He was a guy that would tackle, but wasn't the best tackler. And I don't love his demeanor as a tackler. It doesn't seem like he's very interested in getting into the fray. And so there's just a lot of things that I'm turned off by with the game of Lonnie Johnson. And so in the second round, 54th overall pick, defensive back out of Kentucky, Lonnie Johnson for me is... So we move on to the next pick, second round, very next pick, 55th overall. So Texans back-to-back selections in the second round. Offensive lineman out of Northern Illinois, Max Scharping is the pick. So the Texans needed help on the offensive line, and they doubled down on offensive tackles early on in this draft. Two of their first three selections, offensive linemen. That's the way to do it. Get rid of the need right away. You're protecting your biggest investment on this football team in Deshaun Watson. It needed to be done. It had to be done. You got it done. And so here is Max Scharping, 6'6", 327. So he's a big, big man. 34-inch arms. 53 consecutive starts at Northern Illinois. So you're talking about a guy that is extremely durable and reliable, and that's something that you cannot discount when talking about offensive linemen. 27 starts at left tackle, 22 starts at right tackle, and 4 at right guard. So you're getting a guy with infinite versatility here, has played multiple positions along the offensive line, so you feel comfortable plugging him into a number of different spots. And again, with offensive linemen, I like to try them everywhere to prove that they can't before I tell them they can't. And so I'd like to give them every opportunity to prove that they can before I say that they can't and move them somewhere else. And I think Max Scharping is going to be one of those guys. You may just throw him in at right tackle and keep it moving. And so a big offensive tackle prospect that shoots up out of his stance and shows above average movement skills. Extremely durable and offers positional flexibility. While Scharping does a lot of things well, including handling the speed rush to the outside, he leaves the door open to the inside far too often, sometimes wide ass open, letting all kinds of flies, edge rushers, and the likes towards the quarterback. He also fails to sustain on the second level blocks and may be affected by elite level rushers at the next level to be a trustworthy left tackle. So when I looked at him, my comp for him, I looked at him the first guy I thought about. He looked just like him. If you would have told me that they were somehow related, I would have believed you just because of how they meet the eye test. He looked just like Rick Wagner of the Baltimore Ravens. The first guy I thought about when I saw Scharping shoot out of his stance with that erect style at Northern Illinois, I thought of Rick Wagner of the Baltimore Ravens, now of the Detroit Lions. But I just thought of Rick Wagner in Baltimore, and that's what I see from Max Scharping, a right tackle that you can plug in, and I think you can get some good work out of Max Scharping. My only concern with him is that sometimes he opens up too quickly to the outside, worried about speed, and just leaves that inside track, that door wide open to the inside, and he's not good enough to recover to where he can stop the bleeding if a guy is able to get inside of that opening. He can't get back and recover and push that guy around and allow that quarterback to maneuver and get rid of the football. So that's something that he really concerns me with. And elite guys will set him up. They will rush to the outside on several snaps in a row, get him to open up to try to adjust to the speed, and then they'll come inside and they'll beat him like he stole something. And so he's going to have to get better at adjusting the counters and things of that nature. But this guy is really solid. I didn't have a problem with this pick necessarily. But again, I don't love Max Scharping. I don't. And again, we're going to see how these guys they pan out. I don't want to undersell Max Scharping, but again, him getting beat to the inside happened way too much and way too often for my liking, and so that's something that does concern me. But I love the size, I love the length, I love the durability, and I think this guy could be really solid. We'll see how he's coached up. We'll see where he plays. I'm thinking it's got to be right tackle for him, and we'll see how this goes. But in the second round, 55th overall selection, offensive lineman out of Northern Illinois, Max Scharping for me is. Now, this next pick is one that I can definitely get down with. Thought this was an excellent pick here in the third round, 86th overall selection. Tight end out of San Diego State, Kahale warting is the pick. So this was a guy that I talked about during the draft process, and I talked about tight ends ad nauseum. I love this tight end class. I think they're going to be really special. When we look back on the 2019 draft class of tight ends, I think there's going to be at least 4 of these guys, if not more, that are impactful players for years to come. Some guys that I think are going to be dominant pass catchers in this league. And then I think you can even pluck some guys that'll be dual threat tight ends that can also block in the run game and give you something there as well. And I think Kahale Waring is one of those guys that ultimately will morph into a dominant pass catching tight end with the ability to block and offer you something there as well. And when you look at this guy's size at 6'5", 252, he just screams NFL tight end. And I don't think this guy's done growing. This is a guy that has put on 30 pounds since his freshman year of college, and he is really, really starting to blossom, and he still hasn't hit his apex yet as a tight end. And so I think this guy's got so much growing to do, and I think that kind of upside has to get you excited if you're a Houston Texans fan. 6'5", 252, as I mentioned, 33-inch arms, so you've got a really nice catch radius. I'm talking about not having big enough wide receivers. You're adding a tight end here that's going to give you a little bit of something in that regard. 4'6", 40, so the guy can run at 6'5", 252. A big athletic tight end with versatility as an inline traditional Y and a flex move tight end as well. Grew 30 pounds from his freshman campaign and is still evolving as a blocker. With the length, size, athleticism, and tremendous upside, Waring is an intriguing prospect at the next level. I see so much good in what this guy can become. I get excited when I watch guys like him because I know he's not a finished product. He's not coming into the league and there's a ceiling and a cap on what he can be. This guy can be as good as he wants to be. If he's willing to put in the work and these coaches are good at what they do, this is a guy that you can mold into a big-time playmaker at the next level. Like I said, I lump him into the category of elite tight end prospects in this draft that I think have a chance to be really special at the next level. There are about 5 or 6 guys that I was just absolutely blown away by their talent base. And he's one of those guys. And so I think you get an absolute steal here in the 3rd round. I wouldn't have been shocked if this guy was gone off the board in the 2nd round because of the upside. You know, he's a big guy, shown the ability to block a little bit, but still has a ways to go there. But you see the potential for him to be a really good blocker. And I think that his pass catching hasn't totally been tapped into yet. And I think he's going to get even better as a pass catcher. So you just like his frame. You like what this guy brings to the table. He looks the part of an NFL, and he's a big dude. Like, when you see him, he looks bigger than 6'5". He looks like he's 6'7". One of those, I don't want to say Gronk type guys, but he looks big like Gronk. Like he's a big hulking figure at the tight end position, and he moves like an athletic freak. So I like Kahale Waring, and I think this is a really good pick for you. My comp for him is Tyler Kroft, the ex-Cincinnati Bengal, now a Buffalo Bill tight end that came into the league out of Rutgers. What a lot wasn't expected out of him, but he turned into a very serviceable backup option at the tight end position. And with Tyler Eifert getting injured so many times and so often in Cincinnati, he was often looked upon as a starter out there, and I thought he did some good things for the Bengals. He's now moved on to Buffalo. I think this guy going to come in initially. And you've got other tight ends that have a little bit of experience. 2 guys you drafted last year. I think he's going to come along a little bit slowly, but eventually you're going to see the promise in Kahale Waring sooner rather than later. And I think this is a guy that can help you. It wouldn't shock me if he was a contributor in his rookie season. That being said, a 3rd round, 86th pick, tight end out of San Diego State, Kahale Waring for me is. And let's take tight end off the board while we're at it, as that's a need that I thought you needed to knock down in this draft. So now we move on to the 5th round, 161st pick overall, edge rusher out of Texas, Charles Amina what? Amina who is the pick. Charles Amina what? Amina who is the pick. And this is a guy that I look at and I say to myself, what is he exactly? And if the Texans are going to continue to play a 3-4 base defense with, Watt and company along the defensive line, he doesn't fit to me a 5-tech, which is what I think the Texans drafted him to be. I don't think he's strong enough at the point of attack to be a 5-tech. Not to say he can't get stronger. I think there is a potential for him to get a little bit stronger functionally and get his core a little bit stronger and be a little bit more impactful in the run game. But as it stands right now, I looked at him as more of a base 4-3 defensive end, even a guy that could stand up in a 2-point stance as an outside backer and maybe be effective there as a bigger outside linebacker. But I didn't necessarily see 5-tech, which is what I think the Texans have drafted him to be. That being said, he may evolve into a really good football player. I see some of the traits and tools there that probably got the Texans excited here in the 5th round, but those tools seem fleeting to me. They're too inconsistent. You don't see them enough, but we'll see. But Charles Omenihu is a guy, 6'5", 280, 36-inch arms. His arm length is stupid. All right. 36-inch arms are absolutely ridiculous. That's NBA wingspan right there. You rarely see even offensive tackles with that kind of length, let alone an edge rusher. He's got to utilize that to his advantage. There should be a lot of strong arming of the law, long arm of the law. There should be a lot of pole vaulting. Whatever you want to call it, I call it the long arm of the law. But that one arm stab where you just put a tackle on skates because he can't get to you because of your length and your ability to drive him back with that one arm. One arm is better than two always when you're rushing a quarterback. He's got 36-inch arms. There isn't a tackle that he will face with that kind of length. He should be utilizing his length to his advantage all day, every day. 4'9", 240, 35 or 36.5-inch vert. Ridiculously long-limbed edge rusher that lined up everywhere for the Longhorns. Omenihu's length and latch and snatch technique may be his best attribute at this present moment. Not a 5-tech, but more of a base 4-3 defensive end, Omenihu could stand to get much stronger at the point of attack and diversify his pass rush. But he's a well-built rusher with an aggressive streak that, if properly honed, could turn into a productive NFL defender. 17 career and collegiate sacks for Charles Omenihu. And this is a guy that plays the game with a nasty streak. There's a play that I was watching him against. I was watching him against K-State, and he hits the quarterback. And I want to say he might have even sacked him. But on this particular play, he hits the quarterback, and it was a sack. I believe it was a sack. And he stands over the quarterback, and he is just giving him work. And I'm like, bruh, and the officials are standing right there. I'm like, no, Charles, no, what are you doing? You can't do that. And I liken it to you being out with your homeboy and your girl is with you and your homeboy is like, yo, remember that girl we saw the other night that you was trying to holler at? You like, dude, what you doing? My girl right here. What you doing? Like, bro, what are you doing? You can't be doing this in front of the official. And he didn't care. Like, two of his teammates had to yank him back. The official jumped in, was ready to throw the flag. I'm like, hey, Charles, bro, what you doing? So he's got a little bit of a nasty streak in him, which I like. You got to tote that line, though. You got to make sure you straddle that line correctly. Don't overstep your boundaries. But I like guys that play with an edge. His latch and snatch is dominant, and it should be with 36-inch arms. I can't tell you how many times I saw him grab, ragdoll, and throw a guy and thrust himself towards the quarterback, and that propelled him to get a sack. So his latch and snatch, to me, is his best move right now. I'd like to see him start using that long arm of the law. Pole vault, you call it whatever you want, that one arm stab that allows you to bull rush a guy and put him on skates because of those 36-inch arms. He's got to use that length to his advantage to be a better pass rusher. I'd like to see him get stronger in the run game as well. I think his comp is Deatrich Wise Jr., the ex-Arkansas defensive lineman that was drafted by the New England Patriots a couple of years ago. He to me, is eerily similar to Deatrich Wise Jr., a guy that I looked at as a minimal pass rusher that, you know, on his best day could get you a sack or two in any given game, but not going to light up the stat sheet necessarily, but is a very solid option in a rotation on the defensive line. And if he maximizes his abilities, Deatrich Wise also had long reach and arms and whatnot. If he maximizes his body and his potential, could be a really productive NFL defender. So the same way that I felt about Deatrich Wise Jr., I feel about Charles Omenihu, and that's why I comp him to him. And so here in the 5th round, 161st pick overall, edge rusher, defensive lineman, Charles Omenihu for me is. So we go to the 6th round, 195th pick overall, defensive back out of Central Michigan. Xavier Crawford is the pick. So Xavier Crawford is interesting. He's an undersized corner that I feel like would be better suited in the nickel. Now you've already got a nickel that you got from Jacksonville last year in free agency in Colvin. So I'm not really sure if Xavier Crawford is a guy that you're looking to try out wide. And again, I always want to try guys and have them prove to me that they're not before I say they're not. And so I would give him every opportunity to play out wide and see how he does out there. But he's, to me, a boy amongst men out there. I didn't like what I saw from him with physical receivers who were willing to lay hands on him. He seemed like a guy that was disinterested in the run game. And he's a small guy. He plays like a smaller corner. So I would prefer him to be in the slot more so than out wide with those big dogs out there. He's, to me, I'd much rather see him kick inside and keep him away from those big, ferocious dogs out there. So 5'11", buck 87, 4'4", 840, 37.5-inch vert. So, those are all good numbers there. Undersized defensive back that plays with an undersized mentality. Non-participant in the run game, as I mentioned. It's as if he wants to get blocked. I can't tell you how many times he was looking like, hey, man, come block me, man. Come on now. Get over here. Put your hands on me. Put right here. All right. Now move me out the way so I don't have to get involved in this play. I don't want to tackle anybody. Come on now. Block me. Like, it's as if he wants to be blocked. He doesn't want to tackle. So that's really, really disconcerting right there. I have a problem with that. Lacking in size or desire to help in that regard. But as a pass defender, he's solid, especially when he is pressed up to a receiver at the line of scrimmage and is able to stay in phase. In off coverage, to me, he's a liability, all right, because he doesn't possess elite closing ability. Hence, the PBU to INT ratio, which is 12-1. He had 24 pass breakups in his career to only 2 interceptions. If you have elite closing speed, you're going to convert a couple more of those to interceptions instead of pass breakups. But when you just get there in the nick of time, that's how you end up with a pass breakup. When you're getting there early or you're on time, like you're there when the ball gets there, you got a chance to make a play. But when you're getting there as the ball is already there and your only recourse is to knock it away, then you end up with a pass breakup. Look, pass breakups are great, but I'd much rather have the rock if I can get my hands on it. So this is a guy that I think is solid, but I'm more convinced he's more of a nickel. So I want to see what the Texans are going to do here. Obviously, we'll see what this guy has to offer, but I see him as a nickel, not necessarily as a boundary corner. My comp for him is the ex-Oakland Raider, ex-San Francisco 49er, Terrell Brown, a guy that was very small, skinny, similar stature. I thought Terrell Brown was a little bit more feistier in terms of trying to get into play and make a tackle, but even he wasn't a great tackler. Xavier Crawford wants no part of tackling anyone, and so that's something that's a big turnoff for me. But still, he does have some ability underneath, especially those underneath routes where he's up, pressed up against a receiver at the line of scrimmage. I think he does his best work when he's right there in the face of a receiver. I hate when he's in off coverage. Seems like guys are able to get completions on him when he's off 7 to 10 yards. But in any event, 6th round, 195th pick overall, defensive back out of Central Michigan, Xavier Crawford for me. And we already took cornerback off the board. That's right. You took Lonnie Johnson. He is. So we move on to our final pick in this draft, 7th round, 220th overall selection. Fullback out of Texas A&M, Cullen Gilaspia is the pick. So Cullen Gilaspia is a do-it-all Swiss Army knife fullback that made a conversion and switch from a linebacker over to fullback. He's still learning the nuances of the position. You can tell he's extremely raw, but what you can't sleep on is the athleticism, the energy, and the life and the zest at which he plays this game. He got the 12th man jersey, and that's a huge honor at Texas A&M to get the number 12 jersey. So that's the representation of the 12th man at Texas A&M, and he earned that jersey because of his play on special teams and just his ability to do whatever is asked of him. I thought he got a really good chance in 18 under Jimbo Fisher to show some ability as a fullback. He was more of just a special teams demon for them throughout his career, blocking kicks and things of that nature. But he actually got to touch the rock a couple of times. You watch him in the Clemson game. He has the very first run of that game, and it's a nice run. And you see a little bit of ability there. Not necessarily a guy you want to hand it to very often, but in a pinch. And as a matter of fact, I classified him as a running back, so we take one running back off the board, but he's more of a fullback. I don't see him getting the football in that capacity at the NFL level. But, you know, in a pinch, you got a couple of injuries, you need somebody to tote the rock. This is a guy that may be able to do it in certain situations, but he can catch the football. Let me give you a quick breakdown of Cullen Gilaspia. 6'1", 234, ran a 4.57 at his pro day, so that's impressive. And you can actually see a little bit of that speed on tape. But I was surprised. I didn't think he was that fast, so that was impressive. Ex-linebacker convert to fullback that is raw as the day is long. However, his infectious energy, sneaky athleticism, solid hands, and willingness to be physical along with outstanding special teams prowess gives Gilaspia a fighting chance to crack an NFL roster. So this is a guy that right now, to me, still making that transition over from to a linebacker to fullback. I don't think he's a complete finished product yet. When he goes to block guys, he's not engaging them and sustaining. He's just popping pads. He's just bumping into guys and hoping that his contact is enough to knock that defender off balance and out of the play. But what he will find is that he needs to engage and stay locked into that defender. And once he is able to do that, because the contact isn't soft, it's physical contact that should be enough to get the job done, but he needs to stay engaged with that defender and not allow that defender to be able to withstand his contact, bump off of him, and then go make a play, which I saw a couple of times with him not sustaining his block. So there's some things he can do better in the run game, and I think he'll get better at those things. But I love his ability to catch it out of the backfield and be another option to hand it to. And again, it always helps when you have the ability to play special teams the way that he does. If he's looking to crack this roster, that's going to be his best way to do so initially. And then he may be able to gain the trust of the coaches to give him some opportunities at the fullback position. But in any event, 7th round, 220th pick overall, fullback out of Texas A&M, Cullen Gilaspia for me is so not my favorite draft in the 2019 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series, but really you don't have anybody to blame. The guy that made these selections and Brian Gain is now gone. And so it is what it is. We'll see. Again, he may have left you a gift on the way out. We don't know. He could have also left you a sack of shit. And we don't know what it's going to be right now. And so it'll be interesting to see what this turns out to be. In the meantime, me and other people like myself are going to continue to criticize this draft because I thought there were better people, better players on the board at the time of several of your early selections in this draft. I thought you could have went in a number of different directions to get players that could have achieved the same goal but better. But again, you identified these players as Houston Texans and you selected them. Now let's see if it pans out for you. Let's take a look at the score for the Texans in the 2019 NFL Draft. So that's going to do it for the Houston Texans and their 2019 NFL Draft Wrap-Up. I'm your man, Louie Tee. Thank you for joining me. Remember, if you haven't already done so, what are you waiting on? Subscribe to the Louie Tee Network for more great content. Turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a thing when we're talking Texans or anybody else in the National Football League here on the Louie Tee Network. Make sure you also check out the Louie Tee Network podcast available on Stitcher, Google Music Play, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, and of course the website louieteenetwork.net. And also, remember, if it's not your man T, it's not the best NFL coverage. It could be. Until next time, I'm your man Louie Tee, signing off. Have a good one. And happy Father's Day to every father out there. You guys are greatly appreciated. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Have a good one.
Louie Tee Network.